If you go to Europe or South America, some of the most iconic football stadiums are often wedged into dense neighborhoods and have great transit access and very little parking. Contrast American football stadiums, which are often behemoth structures in a sea of pavement way out in the suburbs. My question for today, though, is as the US continues to slowly embrace soccer, are we embracing good stadium design along with it? It's the top 10 football soccer venues in North America, and it's coming up next. This is City Nerd, weekly content on cities and transportation. Viewer suggested topics, always welcome down in the comments. And this is one I've had several requests for, including video suggestion, top 10 most transit accessible soccer, MLS, stadiums in the US and Canada. Can include Mexico if you want. Yeah, of course I want. This is a US based channel and I always feel a little weird including Canada in something, but not also including Mexico. Like, why would you even think about doing that? Anyway, today I'm looking at not only MLS/NWSL stadiums, but also stadiums from the top flight of Mexican soccer, which is Liga MX. And I'm not just gonna look at transit, I am gonna look at all the urbanist aspects of these stadiums. I'm not gonna go through what I mean by urbanist since I already covered that in my ballparks video. And I'm not gonna cover the history of association football the way I did with baseball either, because the history of soccer is just not as intertwined with the history of American cities to anywhere near the same extent. I do want to go over my scoring criteria using an example stadium. And you know I've been doing this thing where I choose a different sports venue every week to track my subscriber count because I just think sports venues are such a unique and challenging and I think important urban land use. And I'm gonna choose one we haven't looked at yet. It's the Mestalla, home of Valencia Football Club of the Spanish top flight. You're going to see the Mestalla scores extraordinarily well across all the criteria, so let's go through it. 1, urban integration. Does the stadium interface seamlessly with the surrounding neighborhood without overly disrupting the grid? 2, pedestrian friendliness. Are there good walkable connections directly to the stadium? 3, bike friendliness. Do you have high quality routes to the stadium and do you have good places to park your bike? Valencia just has a really nice bike network. 4, transit, and this is really looking at rail because I'm a train snob, but do you have services within a quarter mile or so and how are the frequencies at, say, midday on weekends? 5, parking footprints are bad. The bigger they are, the more points you lose. And finally, stadium footprint. A compact stadium is an efficient use of urban land. Before we get started, one thing that I found absolutely shocking as I was going through this was just how many bad stadiums there are, and I'm definitely gonna shame a few cities when we get to the dishonorable mentions. Okay, I think that sets the table, so let's get into it. Number 10 is Lumen Field, home of Sounders FC and the NWSL's OL Reign. I already talked about Lumen in my NFL stadiums video, and I did think about limiting this list to soccer-specific stadiums, but Lumen has good transit access, it's pretty walkable to downtown, and in a way, playing in an NFL stadium is a more efficient use because they're leveraging a venue that was already there. I do want to point out that Lumen keeps getting better. There's higher quality transit service now than when it was originally built. And if we use a time slider, you can see that a lot of what used to be parking on the north side of the stadium is now the kind of smart, walkable, mixed-use urbanism that's illegal to... never mind. Number 9 is Exploria Stadium, home of Orlando City and the Orlando Pride. Exploria is wedged into the Paramore neighborhood, which I feel like is part of downtown Orlando, inasmuch as Orlando has a downtown. But you can just see in the aerial that it squares off to the downtown grid nicely, and it's pretty compact. really about the same size as the Amway Center, which is a basketball arena, so you'd expect that to be smaller. A little aside here, so I can shout out Tesho Akindele, who has had a pretty good MLS career and represents Canada internationally. He plays at forward for Orlando City now, and I think he might be the highest profile, vocally urbanist professional athlete. He's really good on Twitter, and I definitely recommend following if you use that website. Tesho is somebody who can really help spread urbanist thinking to new audiences, and I think the world really needs that. Number 8 is TQL Stadium, home of FC Cincinnati. I love the compactness and the location right at the edge of the Over the Rhine neighborhood. It doesn't seem overparked from the aerial. It's really leveraging things that make Cincinnati great. There's a nice bikeway on Central Parkway too. It's a city that's doing a lot of things right. It's just maybe freeway removal should be on the to-do list. Number 7 is Saputo Stadium, home of CF Montreal. This one's urbanist in a different way. It isn't compact and squared off to a grid the way Orlando and Cincinnati are. And I don't love the Olympic Games campus vibe, but it is in Montreal proper. It does have good bike connections, and it's got really good proximity to the one line, which has pretty nice frequencies on weekends. Let's head south, way south, for number 6. This is Estadio Victoria in Aguascalientes, home of Club Necaxa. Google doesn't have great aerial imagery for this one, but you can see it's central. There's very little parking footprint, and it's compact and squared off to the grid nicely. If we drop into street view, you can get a sense of the urban fabric. There's a bike vendor, there's a mix of storefronts and residential, there's ice cream? What do you want? Number 5 is a city that I would not have expected to make this list, but let's give proper respect to Houston, Texas. This is PNC Stadium in the East Downtown District where the Dynamo and the Dash play. I don't know if Houston has come up on a top 10 list of anything I've done except for good city pairs for high-speed rail, but let's look at it. East Downtown is not probably what you visualize when you think about Houston. There's a lot of new density, particularly around the stadium. There's a light rail stop right out front where you can get the green line or the purple. Buffered two-way bike lane along Walker Street, which, well, I don't know how well it's working, but they tried. All kinds of places around East Downtown to pre or post function. It really is a cool neighborhood. And I did penalize for surface parking, but a lot of this is probably shared with the Astros. Let me know if I got that wrong. Number 4, we're going to Mexico again, this time to the city of Toluca. This is Estadio Nemesio Diaz, home of Toluca FC, and it's the only stadium on my list that appears to have no parking footprint whatsoever, although a couple others are close. I do like that this one really dovetails into a residential neighborhood, like the one in Aguascalientes, but this one faces onto Jose Maria Morelos Avenue, which is a street with a lot of active uses and a dedicated bus lane too. This stadium, more than probably any on this list, really has the feel of those smaller European or South American grounds that are super integrated into their neighborhoods. I've got the top 3 on the way, but also some honorable mentions and some pretty shocking dishonorable mentions. First, a question that's been rattling around my brain. My perception is soccer or football skews younger, more educated, and more urbanist than other major US sports. And my theory for why that is that a lot of younger, more educated people studied abroad in college, and when they did that, they either adopted whatever their local team was, because there is a local team just about anywhere else in the world you go, and that team is often tightly integrated with the identity of a city or even a neighborhood if it's a larger city. So when you come back to the US, well, maybe it's a bit of an affectation, but you really do want to recreate and experience that kind of culture back home in America. Anyway, give me your theories on this because soccer really has finally started to take root in the US, and I think the demographics are a big driver. Also, brief pause to encourage you to like and subscribe if you want YouTube to promote my foolishness to a wider audience. There are other ways to connect and to support if you're a glutton for punishment and like 15 minutes every Wednesday just isn't enough. Sub count check. Let's go to Jordan-Hare Stadium in Alabama, home of the Auburn Tigers. Yeah, we're now into venues that hold more people than actually live in the city where the stadium is located. Truly incredible stuff. Great job, everyone. All right, back to talking about actual football. Let's hit a few honorables. You know, I actually expected better from the Mexican League, but all the really big teams have American-style stadiums with parking moats, and they're really far-flung from the city centers. Honorable mentions, though, to León and to Atlas in Guadalajara. I know not everyone loves BRT, but these two cities do it about as well as anyone on the continent outside of Mexico City. My other honorable is NYCFC. In fact, they probably belong in this list, but I DQ'd them for playing in a baseball stadium. I realize I counted Lumen Field for the Sounders, but I can count in soccer being played in a football stadium, just not a ballpark. Sorry, my rules. Okay, let's do the worst. I've got a bottom four in no particular order. FC Dallas. Sorry, but stadiums that are 25 miles from the downtown of the city the club is named for just doesn't fly with me. Sporting KC, yeah, apparently it's in Kansas City, just not the Kansas City you were probably expecting. And it is an absolute crater. Colorado Rapids, you're out in the middle of nowhere, and this is a city that basically got their ballpark right, and the NFL and NBA venues are fine, so I don't know what happened here. And the Philadelphia Union, this is just way out there, and I don't understand the thinking. Couldn't they just play at Lincoln Financial Field, or just repurpose like 7 of the gajillion acres of surface parking they have there? Number 3, Audi Field in the Navy Yard area of Washington, and it's home of DC United and the NWSL Spirit. The stadium is pretty new and does not show up in the aerial, so let's drop into Street View and check it out. Protected bike lanes on R and on 2nd. The streetscape along the stadium's frontage is really nicely done, only half a mile or so from the Green Line. I do find DC tends to rate well across just about any urbanism category I come up with, so none of this is really a surprise. Number 2 is Providence Park, home of the Portland Timbers and the Portland Thorns. When I thought about this list, I really thought this was going to be the one that checked all the boxes. It's compact, it squares up to the grid, the stadium frontage has a great relationship to the surrounding neighborhoods, it's walkable, the bike access is great, and the extensive bike parking they set up for games is extremely well used. The red and the blue Max lines run right out front. You would think this would have to be number 1, but it isn't. Instead, number 1 goes to a city that is probably going to show up really high on the list on just about any category I invent. Your Cascadia Cup of urbanism goes to BC Place, home of the Vancouver Whitecaps. The stadium itself is actually not my favorite for actually experiencing a match, but that's not what this list is about. BC Place is right downtown and super walkable, and I love that even though it's not a rectangular venue, there's dense development filling in nearly every corner. This kind of stadium, normally, if it isn't surrounded by parking, it's just got a bunch of empty, windswept plazas at all the corners. Not BC Place. Two-way protected bikeway on Smith Street, which connects to Vancouver's really, really good downtown bike network, and walkable to both the Expo Line and the Canada Line, which run by far the best frequencies of any rail transit system for a city this size in North America. Last thing, I didn't give extra credit for this, but BC Place is not even a soccer-specific stadium. Its primary tenant has historically been the BC Lions of the CFL. So not only is it the most urbanist on its own merits, but it's using infrastructure that's already there, which is smart and sustainable in its own way. And that's all I got. I know someone's gonna feel left out, so just let it all out down in the comments. This is a safe space. Thanks as always to the patrons who give me the leeway to make the kinds of videos that really only I might be interested in. Keep the great topic suggestions coming. I'll be back with a new episode next week, and I'll see you then.